Okay, so we're talking to Aviva Gould, who is no stranger to this podcast because she's produced them, every single one. And if there are a few ums and uhs on these episodes, it's because of her. And she's contributed an occasional question. But now I'm going to be expecting her to provide a bunch of answers. Aviva was my student in a class a couple of years ago. She's up in New York. But I want to start with the podcast itself because it's half named after you. You want to explain that?
Sure, yeah. For context, the class I took with Nathan was Understanding Israel and Palestine. So a really light class. And it was the spring of 2025, and by then I had processed what had happened with the encampment and how campus had been for my junior year, which was the year of October 7th and then the encampment. And it was a very upsetting year to be a person on a college campus, to be a Jewish person, and to be someone who cares about Palestinians and someone who cares about all people. And I felt very divided that year. I felt like I was betraying something by being involved in the encampment and by supporting the organizing work happening, but I also felt deeply betrayed by my Jewish community and their response. I felt pretty betrayed by my Jewish community the second I stepped on campus at GW. But specifically that year, I felt really torn.
Okay, so what I remember, I didn't realize this dated back before October 7th, but what I remember you telling me, and correct my memory, just what struck me was you said after October 7th, you went to Hillel, just like wanting some solidarity and just feeling, I don't belong here. And then went to the encampment and said, I don't belong here. And when you told me this, there was a tear in your eye. And the reason, I mean, anytime a student has a tear in their eye, you notice. But I remember shortly after October 7th, I don't cry. I did then. I just thought, I mean, obviously awful things are happening and it's just going to get a lot worse. But yours seemed more personal. There was no place you belonged. That's what I remember getting the sense from. Do I remember that right?
Yeah. I had a better finger on the pulse than I think the average Jewish student at GW of how dire the situation was for Palestinians. And it was on top of mind a lot of the time. And in Hillel, there was never space for that. Like, I went to Rosh Hashanah services, not at Hillel, at, like, a Reform synagogue that my friend's cousin is the rabbi at, and she spoke a lot about the hostages and about the situation and about October 7th, and she just didn't mention Palestinians. She didn't mention the experience of Gazans, um, and it was, like, deeply disturbing to me because even by Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur or whatever it was, like, we knew that a lot of people had died or were injured or their homes were destroyed, and the ability to just ignore that felt foreign from my understanding of Judaism and really made me grapple with what Judaism is to me. And then at the encampment, I felt like I had to excuse myself for everything. I did a gap year in Israel. I've been to Israel 3 times. Um, I have friends, I have family in Israel. I have people in my life who still think that Israel is a place that they will go on vacation and a recreational, like, hangout. And for me, it's not that. It was. And I think I can't separate it from the political and humanitarian situation anymore. And I don't want to. I don't think it should be separated.
Well, let me bring you up to the present because we've been talking about where you don't feel at home. But right now, it sounds to me like you do feel like you're at home. Tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, so on the other hand, I'm doing a Jewish program right now. I'm doing a fellowship called Avodah, which is a social justice service corps, much like AmeriCorps or the Peace Corps, and you live in a house with a bunch of other young Jews, mostly right out of college or a year or two out, and we are all placed in social justice jobs. I work at a refugee resettlement agency called Common Point, and I manage volunteers, and my roommates work at food kitchens or domestic violence support organizations, or they're paralegals, or a variety of things. Some within the Jewish world. Technically, my organization is a Jewish organization, but nothing to do with Israel. And Avodah specifically does not have a stance on Israel. We speak about how we feel about it as an organization, but we don't actually talk about what's happening on the ground.
So that's hard. And let me give you a linguistic reason and a sociological one that interests me. So your name is Aviva, and you're working now for Avodah. Aviva is a Hebrew name.
It's an
Avodah
Israeli
goes
name.
yes, exactly. And Avodah is a Hebrew name. An organization like that started a century ago would have had a Yiddish name. American Jews went over to often Israeli names for their children after 67. There's a way in which Israel is a part of the fabric of American Jewish life that is unspoken except when you open your mouth and call somebody by name. And so I'm wondering how it is that you avoid that. I mean, you're also living with people in the program, if that's right. Is it
Yes.
something that you discuss a lot with each other, but just don't take an organizational stand on? Is it something where you're afraid to talk about it because you might spark disagreements?
Well, first, I'll give Avodah a little bit of credit for their name. I think that using Hebrew instead of Yiddish is more open because there are Sephardi and other ethnic groups within Judaism that are part of the program. But yes, we talk about it sometimes, but strangely enough, it just doesn't come up that often. There is such a First of all, we talk a lot about politics when we talk about New York politics because New York is in such a cool political time right now. But yeah, it just doesn't come up.
So this is an audio podcast, so nobody could hear your eyes light up when you talk about New York right now. You're excited.
Yeah.
Tell us what's happened to why you're excited.
I'll frame it in the context of this podcast. I have felt for a long time that to be Jewish and not be Zionist means that you are ostracized by the community to some extent, or you just can't talk about it. And in New York right now, there is a Jewish politician running for Congress who is Jewish and not Zionist. And he's doing really well. And he's like a socialist and he's awesome. And it feels inspiring for me to see someone who shares my views and shares my background and is able to speak his mind and not have to like appease this block in the way that I've always felt like I have to appease people when I speak about Israel and Judaism in Jewish spaces.
Okay. Let me ask something. You're describing things that sort of sound like they've been in tension for you. But in my career, in my life, they actually go together a surprising amount. American, Jewish, studying Arabic, living in Jordan or Egypt, sometime in Israel, social justice. There are other people like Aviva in the world. Tell us about your circle of friends and family. Do you stand out? Are you accepted? Are you just seen as normal?
It's a good question. I think my family, I'm really lucky to have my family. I think that we have all grown together a lot. I think that Israel that my mother also did a gap year and lived in Israel, and that was a big reason why I was encouraged to do it. And the Israel that my mother lived in was pre-intifadas and was much less there was much less security, and it was just much less obvious that the separation between Israelis and Palestinians felt less obvious to her than it did to me when I was there, and the different experiences. We've had good conversations, and we've been able to get to a point of understanding where we can have conversations about what happens, and kind of if political news comes out or there's a big event, we're able to have a conversation about it respectfully. My father sometimes comes out as a little more radical than I expect he will. I remember when Pod Save the World originally called it a genocide. I was like, "Oh, wow, this is a very mainstream news source to be saying this." And he said, "But that's what it is. It's a genocide." And I was like, "Oh, Tom, what?" So my parents, like, they've been able to learn and grow with me, which has been really cool. My friends, that's been a journey. The friends I have now are people who I can have conversations with without them jumping down my throat if I say the wrong word. I grew up super Zionist. I grew up in an environment where I didn't know the word Palestinian meant like an actual ethnic group. I just thought it was kind of an abstract concept. And living in Israel for a year and then living in Jordan was like a huge revelation for me. And sometimes I don't have the language to say what I mean. So I'm lucky to have a group of friends from college who have that patience with me and are excited to learn and understand together. Most of my friends, I would say, are not as interested in this as I am. I did J Street in college. Like, I was part of J Street U in college, which was a really great space because I was able to talk about current events with people who had the background, had the context, and were interested in learning and talking about it, and also talking about how we personally felt about it, which is it's hard when it's personal, and being in a Jewish environment, it is personal. And in my program right now, I think there are buzzwords that make people feel a lot of feelings, but most people fundamentally agree that Israelis and Palestinians both deserve to live peacefully and happily, and bombing people at the rate that Israel is doing right now is horrible.
Okay, so you got some friends that you can sort of link up with, your family you can have conversations with. Let me share something about my experience with you and see if it maps yours, and it may not. When you're in public, there's a lot of it's essentially shrillness, not just on social media and, you know, legacy media, political discussions, sort of general political discussions. There just is an awful lot. And in private discussions, I rarely find that. And that's actually new in the sense that discussions I remember from the past generally took place among like-minded people. And so somebody with a very different perspective walks in. It's like, you know, they're saying things that are offensive. I don't want to talk to them. The experience I had teaching the class you mentioned was really positive. I mean, students were really nice to each other. I didn't have a sense of everybody's politics. I didn't, and in a sense, didn't come up. Um, I mean, sometimes it did, but I just got the impression people were used to dealing with difference in private. In public, again, there's not simply the problem of people not accepting views or reacting very strongly, but a lot of policing within camps. You can't say that way. You have to use this word, you can't use that word. A lot of peer pressure in public and in private, just very, very, very different experiences. Maybe that's my age group. Maybe it's the fact that I'm, at this point,
I think
middle-aged white guy close to retirement, and so people talk differently around me. I don't know, but what's your experience?
I think at the point that you were teaching the class, we were media trained, is the equivalent.
Mhm.
So I took my gap year in Israel and I came to college and I was like, I took a gap year in Israel. And that got some really mixed reactions. Um, really mixed, mostly very negative. Um, I was on the VEX, the, like, freshman campus shuttle my freshman year, and I was talking to a girl, and I said, "Oh, I took a gap year," and it's like she was like, "Oh, it comes up. It was a year of my life." I said, "I took a gap year in Israel. I was going to school." And she said, "Oh, what side are you on?" So, it's like people have really harsh reactions, but we were talking about things in that class in a way where we got enough context to understand actually what we were talking about and not just the words that we were using. Not just what side we were on, but what was happening. And I really enjoyed that. And I feel like I personally have enough context to understand when someone speaks to me a certain way. Like, I went to a wedding last week, and my little brother is pretty religious, so it was one of his religious friends. He just, like, brought me as his plus one, cause, and and I met this girl, and the first thing that I learned about her is that she's moving to Israel next week, and she's joining the IDF. And my reaction to that was, "Why would you do that?" Like, in this moment in time, why would you do that? And also, I don't have a relationship with her. I'm not gonna change her mind. I'm gonna be nice, and I'm gonna move on and not continue. I'm not gonna make a thing of it, and I'm also not gonna make an effort to talk to her again. And I think by the time that we took that class with you, people had realized that. And also there were always, like, a couple characters at GW who, like, had big things to say and were angry, and they took up a lot of space. Whereas most people are like me and are curious and wanna understand.
Okay. So, what was your year in Jordan? What year was it?
I did a summer in Jordan. It was the summer of 2022. It
Okay, so it's the summer. Great place to be in the summer. I assume it was hot.
was dry heat, at least.
Okay. But so it's before October 7th, a full year before.
Mhm.
What was it like being there?
That was crazy. Going from a year in Israel to a summer in Jordan, and also my Arabic was I had had 1 year of Arabic, so it was pretty hard to communicate. I had the most trouble with my American classmates. All of my classmates were either Texans or from Arkansas or Arab Americans from Texas. And they were the white Americans were Trump supporters, and the Arab Americans were anti-Semitic. They were anti-Zionist and they were anti-Semitic, which are 2 different things, but they were both of them. Um, and I had a really hard time with those people, and I had a lot easier time with the actual Jordanians I met, most of the time because I didn't tell them that I had lived in Israel. Like, I kept it very private. I told one friend I made there who was Jordanian. She was Jordanian Palestinian, and we became very close, and I shared that with her after we'd been friends for a while. But I would say I felt uncomfortable a lot of the time, mostly because of my own kind of perception. There were Israeli flags painted a lot of places, on trash cans, on the street for people to drive over. People really hated Israel, understandably. Like, it's a 60% Palestinian city, refugees from Palestine, and I had just never really met Palestinians before. I had never heard these experiences. I'd heard, like, "Oh, this is what the Nakba was," but I didn't understand how deeply what I had learned growing up had infiltrated my mind until I, like, was arguing with someone about the intifadas, and I was like, "The intifadas were very violent," and they were like, "No, the first intifada was not violent," and I just had never I didn't know that. No one had ever told me that. It was like intifada in my head was violence. It was like a shattering of self to understand that what I had learned was wrong and that a lot of the sources that I trusted were just incorrect or or purposefully perpetrating a narrative that I wasn't sure I believed anymore.
Mhm.
But also, like, I didn't I yeah. So, it was pretty earth-shattering for me to go to Jordan as, like, a 20-year-old Jewish girl, and my Arabic got better as well.
Well, that's good. What you're describing doesn't sound unusual to me in the sense that students who go to study abroad do go because they're curious. And it can be jarring and disturbing to hear points of view completely different from your own, but you're expecting difference. When you're dealing with Americans, you're not expecting difference. In a sense, there's a claim. It's like, you shouldn't be like that, instead of, oh, this is new and interesting. Did you wind up spending much time with the Americans or avoiding them?
Mostly avoiding them. I had one American friend who was super nice, and he really wanted to be in the military. And if you know me, I am not a huge fan of the military. But the fact that the person I was closest with was someone who was really gung ho about joining the army was kind of a sign of the vibe of the group. But I really built strong relationships with Jordanians. As seen on this podcast, I joined the Jordanian women's rugby team, and actually Chris, who we interviewed, is that person who I confided in about my time in Israel. I was also able to meet queer people. Some of the people on that rugby team were queer, and it was super interesting to me because I had grown up in this, like, "Oh, everyone has to be okay with being gay." Like, if you're not 100% okay with it, then you're a bad person. And I came to this society where, like, the norm was not that it was acceptable to be queer. And there were so many kind and incredible people, and people were so generous and welcoming and nice, and I didn't talk about this part of myself. And even the people who did identify as queer and were Jordanian or Palestinian talked about it very differently than I do. It wasn't as black and white. It was like there was so much room, there was so much gray area, and they were really navigating it in this expert way that I'll never fully understand. But I found the Jordanians and my rugby team a much better community than the Americans.
Okay. So tell us where else you traveled in the Middle East.
I went to Egypt in April,
Mhm.
which was awesome. I visited my best friend Zoe, who is working in Egypt for the year. And it was fairly similar to Jordan, just a lot more chaotic.
Okay. And then let's go back to your year in Israel. So it was a gap year, just graduated from high school. You said you grew up essentially, you said super Zionist. So you go there with the level of excitement?
I grew up Zionist, and also when I say super Zionist, I mean super Zionist for Massachusetts, for Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is Zionist at all. I grew up in this super anti-Zionist environment of Cambridge, and then within my little bubble of Jews in Cambridge. So I already had this dichotomy that then continued throughout my life. And I got a lot of flack for the things I said about Israel in high school. And with context now, I really understand why. But then I didn't. And it felt like just anger for no reason. It felt very personal and very attacking. And it was hard for me to separate myself from the bigger issues. So when I went to Israel, I was curious. I wanted to understand what was going on. And I really wanted to understand, like, the Palestinian issue, what was happening. But then when I went, people really didn't want to talk about Palestine. People really wanted to talk about how much they hated the Orthodox. That was the political issue that was hot, and how much they hated Bibi Netanyahu and wanted him out, which he did get out while I was there. But then it was Naftali Bennett, so it was like not better, but kind of better. I don't know.
And then he got back in.
And then he got back in, and now he's back, which is also
Did you have any contact with Palestinians there? The territories, Israeli Palestinians?
such a good question. Yes, I did. I was living in the dorms, and it was COVID. So I was also there during COVID, which was crazy. Like, I came October 2020. So I was pretty isolated
And
to
where were you?
I was in Tel Aviv. I was living at Tel Aviv University in the Einstein dorms, in the international dorms, and basically anyone who lived close enough to Tel Aviv was living with their family, and the only people who were living in the dorms were international students and Arab students who lived too far or, like, really wanted to live in Tel Aviv. So I befriended a couple of the students who lived in my dorm complex. My friend Aline is still a friend of mine. She was Druze, which, for those who don't know, is a smaller ethnic minority in northern Israel, Syria, and Lebanon. And they do not identify as Arab. They are not Muslim, but they have some similar practices to Islam, in my understanding. And it's a bit more traditional. Druze men serve in the IDF, but Druze women don't. That was my first introduction into, I won't say Arab, but I'll say Arabic speaking cultures because I got to stay with her for about a week in her family's village. And I spent actually Independence Day there, Israeli Independence Day in a Druze village, which was pretty fascinating. And they were pretty excited about it. They're actually pretty pro Israel in a really fascinating way. Her boyfriend, now fiance, just finished his service. So that means he served for like 5 years, which is very unusual. And I also met these Arab students, like Palestinians with Israeli citizenship, basically, who I just didn't understand until I got there. We were playing a pickup basketball game once, and I was trying to make conversation. I was like, "Oh, where did you guys do your army service?" And they were like, "We're Arab. We don't serve in the army." And I hadn't known that. I hadn't known that, like, Arabs don't serve in the army, which is crazy because it's, like, a huge part of Israeli society that Arabs don't do that. But it was just, like, showed me how little I knew. But they were super nice.
Did you go to the territories at all?
I have never been to the territories. I have never been to the West Bank. I've driven through to get to the Dead Sea. Big bucket list item for me, is to go. It was very hard to enter during COVID, I will say. That's my main excuse. And I didn't have the understanding of what I would wanna do there until basically when I was leaving in June. And then some of my friends who I'd been living with went on some kind of peace building, understanding tours that summer, but I had to come home. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
And have you been back to Israel since?
no, pointedly so. I tried to go when I was in Jordan. I tried to go for a weekend to see a friend of mine, and I really did not understand how you cross the border there, and I ended up in a taxi for approximately 2 hours driving and then 2 hours back. It was really a mess. I saw a lot of goats, but I did not go to Israel.
The bridge
So
was
no, I have
closed?
not been. What?
Did you go at a time when the bridge was closed?
No, I tried to go to the northern entrance because I thought for some reason that that would make sense. I didn't really do There isn't a lot of information online. It's not easily accessible to foreigners how to do that crossing, and I was too scared to ask anyone. So, I just tried to figure it out myself, and I ended up in a taxi with a man who spoke no English, truly no English, directing him from my phone because he only had a flip phone, trying to drive to the north of Jordan and Israel, and it was a disaster. I was very upset that I didn't get across. And then, maybe it worked out. And I would like to say I was recruited to the Maccabi rugby team, which for those who don't know what the Maccabi Games are, it is the Jewish Olympics. There is a team of Jewish people from as many countries as they can get that compete in Israel in a series of sports games, and I was recruited to the American rugby team for that. But I did not wanna go to Israel unless I was going for some sort of peace building mission, so I declined the offer.
You must be a good rugby player.
I'm not that good. I don't think that the Jewish rugby contingent of America is, like, very substantial, so I think I fit into the 2 boxes.
I see, okay, I think that's probably true for most countries. There aren't a lot of Jewish rugby players. Maybe in the UK,
Maybe we
but
could've won.
yes, yes. Okay, final question. Tell us what it's like working on this podcast. You listen to all of them, you edit all of them, you've listened to every single episode more than anybody else alive.
I want it to be clear to listeners that I listen to every episode at least 4 times in the editing process. It feels really good to be part of this for my spirit, for my soul, to feel like I'm learning and adding to the media environment in a positive way. I feel like I've gotten through the worst of the shock through my various study abroad experiences, and I'm now in a period of learning, and that is really exciting because it's a lot more fun to learn than to be constantly shocked and have your, like, world shaken. So I've really enjoyed it, and I think you're a good interviewer, not to whatever, but it's also been interesting talking about language. I took Arabic for 4 years, and I'm horrible at Arabic, and it has been so fundamentally challenging for me. My GPA could have been so much higher in college if I did not do it. But hearing Layla Shadid talk about her love for Arabic and her connection to it reminded me why I did it for 4 years. And yeah, overall, I
More
like
like you.
doing this podcast.
Well, that's good to hear. I didn't like studying Arabic either. I was more like you than Layla Shadid. It wasn't my roots, and it was just hard, and frustrating, and a lot of work with enormous payoff, but it took so long to get to the payoff.
Yeah, and I have not been practicing, so we'll see.
All right, thanks for the work on the podcast, and very good talking to you and having you talk and not just listen.
Thank you so much.